Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for another Firebrand video. In this video I wanted to talk a little bit about a question that has become fairly foundational to current discourse, and although I've seen some good answers to this, I've seen many awful answers, and I haven't seen the answer that I would give. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been given somewhere. The internet's a large place. I'm pretty sure it'll be floating out there somewhere, but I haven't seen it, so I wanted to give my version, my answer to this question. And also because I'm probably going to have some discussions where I will refer back to it later on. So let's have a look and see what the question is.
What is a woman?
Define a woman.
What is a woman as far as you're concerned?
What's a woman?
I do want to actually get back to even more of a fundamental question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this.
Sure.
What is a woman?
What is a woman, out of interest?
Talk to us about, I guess, the modern day version of what being a woman is.
Can you answer for me this very simple question? What is a woman? What is a woman?
Yeah. What is a woman?
It's a simple question that now terrifies politicians the world over. And it's this: what is a woman?
Right, so there we go. The perennial question, what is a woman? So we're going to be dividing people into women or not women, and so we're going to have to find ways of defining whether any given person is a woman or not. And I guess this is useful because in society we divide things into men and women, like services and such. And so it's going to be our job as a society to determine whether people are men or women. So we're going to have a look for a definition of what a woman is that provides no ambiguity, is going to allow everybody to be defined and everybody to be accounted for. Because, you know, ultimately, if we're going to have a situation in society where we have to define whether people are men and women, then it's got to count for everybody. So that's what we'll be doing. And there's plenty of answers to this question. Let's have a look at some answers from more right-wing people.
A woman is an adult female human being.
I think a woman is a female-born adult.
A woman is an adult female who does not have a penis.
Adult human female.
An adult female human being is a woman.
What is a woman?
Yeah, of course I know what a woman is. An adult human female.
Well, that was compelling because it's so simple, so punchy, seems so common sense, and we do love common sense, don't we? Well, okay, so I'm sure there's some great answers on the other side. Let's see what everybody's complaining about.
And what is a woman?
An individual who has experiences within a society that reflect womanhood.
What is a woman?
Why do you ask that question?
I just really like to know.
What do you think the answer to that question is?
Well, I'm asking. That's why I came to a college professor who's this is what you do.
What is a woman?
What's that got to do with the price of bread, Piers? I
I've
came here to
literally
speak
told you I'm about to
speech.
debate this
I'm not on that
movie.
segment. Guys, ask the next guest.
What is a woman?
What do you mean ask the next guest? I said ask the next guest.
You don't know what a woman is?
A woman is someone who defines as a woman, period, done.
Someone who wants to identify as a woman is a woman, you know?
What other kinds of answers have you gotten?
A lot of like this, where you're not answering, and I've gotten a lot of that. So
I think it's interesting that you say that some of the people you've interviewed have been reluctant to answer it, and I think that has a lot to do with the questions that preceded it, and the way that you've conducted yourself in the interview.
I believe it's someone who presents themselves societally as a woman.
Can you define what a woman is? Someone feels comfortable identifying as one. I'd say identify as a woman.
But what is a woman?
A woman is it's a combination of your physical attributes and then what you're showing to the world and the gender clues that you give. And hopefully those match your gender identity.
I don't know. I think it's just the sense of, being feminine, like motherhood, like
carrying empathetic traits. I feel like it's really hard to summarize what a woman is.
I feel like it's really not.
I mean, whatever you want it to be.
Answer you should be able to provide is what exactly is a woman?
Well, for me, it's actually a really simple answer, and that's a person who identifies as a woman.
But what are they identifying as?
As a woman.
But what is that?
As a woman.
Do you know what a circular definition is?
Right, okay. I mean, you can kind of feel that the answers are more vague and more thoughtful. People are quite pensive before they reply. They take a long period. And so maybe you're thinking, well, the answer's really, really simple. So why are they not able to get to this really simple answer really quickly? It makes them look stupid. And that's probably why we get politicians who turn around and move from sort of vague, thoughtful answers with lots of pauses and consideration to what seems like a really simple question, and eventually they turn around. So they're tempted to follow into this really short, simple, punchy answer. Okay, so is it really this simple? Let's have a little look. I want to give my answer to this question. And I can't think of anybody who I'd rather have cue me up than Mr. Matt Walsh.
What is a woman? Can you tell me that?
Great, thank you for the question. And I would be very happy to answer it. First of all, though, I would like to say you first, because you might feel like your answer to what is a woman, the adult human female, is really short and really punchy and really clear, and it covers everything, but it really doesn't. Let's have a look. Woman. Let's see the definition. So we've got definitions for women. We've got adult, female, human, and then from Wikipedia we've got female, adult, human. And then there's that adult female human being or whatever it is that people say repeatedly. So we've got, this answer. This is really clear, right? So we've got, I'm going to ignore adult and human because they're not the points of contention, although, even they're not as clearly defined as you'd think. But still, female, this is the point of contention, right? So women are female. Does that tell us anything? Does that define what woman is for us? Not really, unless you have to then define female, because otherwise then you're just substituting it for a different word. What is female? If you're going to say female is women and women are female, and those are your definitions, then you're going to end up with the same circular definition. So you're going to need to give me a proper definition for female. Let's try that here. Female. Now, female, of or denoting the sex that produces over or bears young. That's clear, right? Well, my gran doesn't produce over or bear young. She's too old for that now. And there's plenty of other people who don't produce over or bear young. So are they not women? No, of course they are, because it's of or denoting the sex that produces over or bears young. So they're definitely of or denoting the sex, and they have characteristics, of or appropriate to the sex. So that includes them, right? So that's it done. We're done, are we then? Well, not really, because if you're including people who have characteristics of or appropriate to the sex, or of or denoting that sex, well, then surely that captures a lot of people who you might not want to classify as female. For example, there'll be plenty of individuals who are male, consider themselves male, who might have characteristics of, or who might have characteristics of women. They might denote in some way that sex, and so maybe you're picking those up. Let's face it, this argument is mostly made to exclude trans people from trans women from being women, and so if that is your aim, well, then having characteristics of or appropriate to this sex is going to be something that that includes them, and so you know, and there'll be plenty of other things. You know, men with gynecomastia, which is like male enlargement of breast tissue, might have characteristics of or appropriate to that sex. It doesn't make them women. And so it really doesn't help us in terms of our definition. And we're going to have to split everybody into either woman or not woman. So this is going to have to work for everybody. We're going to need a definition. And not to mention the fact that having a definition of female that includes characteristics of or appropriate to this sex, and this sex being female, so having characteristics of or appropriate to being female is what defines being female, is in and of itself a circular definition. So this is really not helping us. Maybe you might reach for something like genetics in order to be able to define what a female is. That's quite a common place to go. But really, that's not what we use for the word woman at all. When was the last time that you checked somebody's genetics in order to be able to determine whether somebody was a woman? If I was saying, oh, ask that woman over there, I'm not going to stop and check her genetics. I'm not going to find out whether she produces ova or bears young. That's not how I'm using the label woman. And in fact, people have been using the word woman for a long time. As I understand it, it comes from a sort of Germanic Dutch word women, and has been in English language from around the 1600s. But we will have had versions for woman beforehand. We didn't just start referring to people as women as soon as modern day English was made. You know, there's plenty of other words for women in other languages. The label woman has been used for a long time before we knew that women produced eggs. You know, that only happened relatively recently. I think it was in 1875. And, you know, we didn't have an understanding of genetics before we started using the word woman. So, I mean, that's clearly not how we're using the word. We might try and use that to define women, though. Afterwards, we're kind of retrofitting that onto our definition of woman. So what really, how do we define it if we're not using any of these characteristics? Well, let me show you. I'm going to define woman for you in the exact same way you had woman defined for you growing up, the same way everybody learns what woman means. Woman, 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 woman. This is how we define women. As you grow up, you say the woman there, and your child or whoever you're talking to will pick up that term and apply that label accordingly. So then how are we applying it? How are we determining whether somebody is a man or a woman? Well, I mean, the answer is really that the definition is very vague. Actually, what we have, I've opened up an image here. I've got a couple of, I've got more than a couple. I have a few people over here. I'm going to use those later on. But for now, let's just talk about what men and women are. Because if we're dividing everybody into two piles, one is woman. I'm going to try and stick to woman and not woman, because the question wasn't what is a woman and what is a man. It was what is a woman. So we're going to divide, these people have to divide into two piles. Now this is a binary. And actually the definitions that we have here, they're more bimodal, right? So if let me just undo those. We don't actually have two clean piles. Certainly not if we're using over to determine, and certainly not if we're using genes to determine which piles people go in, because, you know, they might end up slightly differently from where you put them. So my gran, for example, would end up on the not woman heap. Let me just refresh. My gran would end up on the not woman pile because she doesn't produce ova. So, you know, this doesn't provide a really clear clear way for us to divide them. If we're just doing it on the basis of over, we're going to find some people, I'm just picking these random people, I have no idea whether they have or ever produced over, but let's say these people, they don't produce over. So they're not going to get classified as women despite having a variety of different criteria that, they consider themselves to be women. They might have, for example, wombs and vaginas and all sorts of other things. So go on, let's try and build those into our definition then. Let me start off by removing some of these things. There we go. And delete them. And in fact, I'm going to delete this bit here as well. And delete that. So we're going to end up with a couple of different criteria. Well, that's not being... There we go. Delete. So maybe we can make some determination based on genes. Okay, so we clearly can't do it with over. Let's do it with genes. So you're going to end up with XX and XY, right? That's nice and easy. We've got two groups of people, although we're not going to be able to divide everyone like that, because although I wonder whether I can erase my pen work. I can. Okay, so these people, now they're okay, but maybe there's a couple people in here with genetic anomalies, unusual genetic situations. Maybe this young lady here is CAIS, complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, and she has XY chromosomes. There's a whole bunch of conditions that you can have that will give you XY chromosomes and give you things like a vagina and other characteristics, secondary sex characteristics. So you might be somebody who has XY and otherwise be considered female. Let me just zoom out a little there. So that doesn't give us a neat division between these. Also, we'll have people who have XXY, and we might even have people who have genetic mosaicism, so some parts of their body might be XX and other parts of their body might be XY, and there's a whole bunch of things. Few people, not very many people, but they're all existing here in the middle. So what we would end up with in this situation is a pile of X, a pile of Y, and a small pile of people who don't fit neatly into one or the other. So what are we going to do with them? This hasn't given us a definition that we can work with, unfortunately. It would have been good, close but no cigar. And close but no cigar is going to be most of what we're doing. So actually, let me just I'm going to grab these ones just here. We'll go for those ones there. So that hasn't given us a definition to work with. Maybe there are other things that you think, and we'll have the same problem with a whole bunch of other criteria that we might use, presence of a womb. Oops. Let me move that back. Presence of a womb. That's, I'll best write that because it looks like I can't spell. Not there's anything wrong with not spelling. Okay, so it's presence of a womb. That might be one thing, but it's not. Again, we can't divide completely on that. And in fact, actually, let's look at some of the criteria that we looked making those judgments earlier on, and they are all stereotypes, really. I guess they're more sort of they're characteristics typically associated with women. So they might include things like no beard or lack of facial hair. They might include things like they'll come down to a whole bunch of gender cues. Things like face shape, or also things like clothing. People use clothing to make snap judgments. In fact, let's I have a link that I saved earlier on. So there's all sorts of things that people use in order to be able to determine one's gender. So, and this is, I really love this book. This is an excellent book. If you're interested at all in articulatory phonetics, this is an excellent book. And so, like, when it comes to speech, There are all sorts of things that we use to determine characteristics about individuals, not just their gender, but also things like their height or their age. But we can determine from somebody's voice to a certain extent. We make judgment calls about what their likely gender is, and we do that on the basis of things like. Let's pull up the other form. One moment. Okay, so we do that on the basis of things like harmonics of their voice. And then this is, if I actually listed all of the things in here that I could think of, there'll be tons of them. So it can be vocal harmonics, actually things like pitch as well, key, and even down to things like use of vocal fry. There's all sorts of things that people use in order to be able to determine somebody's gender, because I showed you a whole bunch of pictures and we looked at those and we said woman, 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 but I could have done the same with voices. I could have played you clips of people's voices and we could have divided them, and these are the things that people use, but no individual one of them is really going to give us a good definition of whether somebody is a man or a woman or not. We can't define by them. We can use them to infer. So, and for most people, you know, this is going to be, most of these things are going to be in alignment. So let's just say, let's take one person from here. Let's take this person, and let's say she is an XX gened person who does produce ova, has a womb, no beards, her clothing is typically feminine, hair length is long, and all of these kind of gender stereotypes that we use to instantly classify people. I'm not saying these make somebody a woman, but I'm saying they are used as part of the analysis of whether we apply that label to somebody or not. I mean, you can say that they shouldn't be, and you know, I'm not going to argue that point with you, but they are used to determine whether somebody has that label applied to them. Maybe erroneously, but perhaps most of the time people get these things correct. So let's say the harmonics are consistent with female harmonics, the same for this, and all of these things are consistent. This is going to be probably the majority of people. This is going to give you that one large pile on one side and that one large pile on the other. However, there is going to be a fairly large number of people who don't even know that maybe they're XXY, but all of the rest of the things are aligned with womanhood. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they just don't produce ova, or maybe they do have facial hair. There's plenty of people who do produce, who do have facial hair. Let me just. There's plenty of people who do have facial hair that are women. I'll just have a look. Facial hair in women. You'll see plenty of examples of women with facial hair. XX women who would be uncontentiously women for any other purpose. People who are women. So there's no one criteria, and you'll find that there'll be a number of people in here who don't have every single one of these criteria. And besides, we're kind of moving away from accepted definitions of what women are here. What we're doing is we're producing a smorgasbord of criteria that we're going to use to divide people. Normally people do these kind of judgments instantly, and they'll get things right sometimes. They'll get things wrong sometimes. You know, there'll be plenty of examples where you say that you think somebody is one gender and they're not. So
good morning. It's nice to see you all again. I just have a few minutes for questions, so let's get started.
Do the Martians have two sexes like we do?
So there'll be plenty of examples where you might look at your mind will instantly make a judgment on somebody's gender according to a whole bunch of different characteristics that your mind is using to make that determination. And it's not always clear that you got it right. You know, there's plenty of examples of where you might make an assumption and then somebody will go, actually, that's not my gender. These are examples of butch lesbians. And you know, there's been videos of these people being challenged going into women's bathrooms, which is as a result of all of the conversations around sex and gender and the fear that that's generated. But this is the reason why people say, you know, that the woman is a person who identifies as a woman, because if this person tells you, I'm a woman, you know, if these people tell you, if this person says, actually, I'm a woman, or I'm a woman, or I'm a woman, then are you going to argue the toss with them? Are you going to argue with them about whether they're right or not? You know, I'm sorry you've got facial hair, or I'm sorry you've got short hair, or you're not gender conforming. No, you're going to accept the fact that they identified themselves as a woman to you, and so you're like, okay, that's, you know, because just because you've got facial hair or short hair and masculine clothing or muscles or whatever, that's not the determining factor. That's going to be a whole bunch of these characteristics you can tick off here on this list. You can tick them all off, and you can make your own decisions about it. But really, what it comes down to is what the person tells you. How would we disambiguate this then? Because we haven't managed to reach a situation where we've divided all of these people. I mean, all we've done is develop a whole bunch of different characteristics. So how are we going to do this? You might be thinking, yeah, okay, look, you're actually just picking hairs because, you know, we've got really, really close to this on the basis of one or more of these factors. Maybe it's like, maybe we make some criteria of you've got like a woman's genes and you produce ova and you've got like a womb, and like maybe you make these criteria that if you've got any one of these, let's say if you've got a womb and well, I mean, let's go with ova because the two seem to be not necessarily both useful at the same time, one or the other. So I'm going to go for ova. Maybe if you produce ova or you've got these genes, then that's what we classify as a woman. Maybe we're going to include people who were born with a vagina as well. We could include that as well, or whatever it is that you're going to use to include the people who you want to include and disclude the people who you want to disclude from this. Well, congratulations. Then a woman then becomes the person who you have certified as a woman. I mean, it's not how the term is used, because you know, we've already discussed how the term is used. That's on the basis of these criteria, or what somebody tells you to use. That's generally how it goes. You'll make a quick judgment on the basis of certain criteria and then get corrected if you're going to get corrected. But if we're going to do it based on these set of arbitrary criteria that you've had, and then we can draw up some kind of certificate that we're going to use to say, right, okay, we've got this checklist, this criteria, and then we're going to stick it on a certificate, and you've either got a certificate that says woman or you don't. It's not going to have one. Well, congratulations, your definition of woman is somebody who is defined as a woman by a piece of paper that says woman. So your definition of woman is somebody with a piece of paper that says they're a woman on it. Because, you know, that's as close as you've managed to get. You know, your arguments, if you're defining women in this way, are no better than anybody else's. They're just underdeveloped. Okay, so if you're the kind of person who is saying that it's really simple to make these decisions based on XX and XY, then you've forgotten to address the many people in here who won't fall into that category. And if you're then saying that you will divide them one way or the other, I mean, when a common judgment these days is what a medical practitioner thinks your genitals look like when you're born. That is obviously has its own issues and doesn't correctly disambiguate between the two groups, or potentially many groups, but it doesn't divide between women and not women. You know, so your answer's probably not very useful in that regard. So, I mean, the too long didn't read answer for this is that there really isn't a proper definition of woman. The edges of what is woman and what is not woman, the edges of this are not clear and crisp. They are fuzzy and poorly defined. They come down to judgment and subjectivity because we don't have this defined very well for us in our society. So there is no real definition of what a woman is. There is a mutually accepted understanding because there are two modes of existence. There is not two manners of existence. It is not a binary choice. We don't only have men and women. We have this kind of two commonly found modes of existence, which are men and women. Those are the two commonly found ways of existing as humans. But there is a lot of sort of grey area and ambiguity in the middle. So, you know, and there are still some good answers to this question, but my answer is to just point to different women and say woman, because it's the only definition that we've ever had. It's the only definition that people actually use. Anything else is just something that you've overlaid on yourself to try and justify your decisions. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in another video.